tonight what we're going to do is get our pie, coffee, try to get finished with it like in 5 minutes. Because we want to get started with the presentation and we want to have everybody out of here by or before 7. Because I know a lot of people want to drive home while it's still daylight. And we know that it's very much still daylight at 7 and even after for quite a while. But by 7:30 it'll start to get dark on us, and I don't want that to happen. So we are going to get started in about 5 minutes. I'll call you back. And if you want to come up here to the front so you can see a little better at that point, that would be just fine. You don't have to stay back at the tables. If you prefer to sit back at the table and continue to eat your pie, that's fine too. The one thing that I'm going to ask is that once the program starts and the presenter starts speaking, that nobody else is speaking, and there will be no questions or answers until the presenters have finished, and then we open for question and answers. So for that reason, we have paper and pencils on the table. So if you leave the table, grab one of those little tablets, or even just a couple pieces of them, and bring your pencil, because things come up in your head, or you have a question during the middle of the presentation, and perhaps by the end of the presentation you don't remember what you wanted to ask them. So that's why we put the pencils and paper out there, so you can write notes to yourself and bring those questions to us during the question and answer period. Okay, any questions about what we're going to do? Okay, so I'm going to give, let me see, what time is it? It's 6:05. I'm going to give you about 3 more minutes. I know some people just got their pie. And like I said, you can stay eating. Once we start, we try to be as quiet as we can so everybody can hear. Thank you. And thanks for coming.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Will you pray with me? Loving God, we thank you for this presentation that we are about to receive. We thank you for the hard work that went into it. We thank you for the transparency that the council is attempting here. We pray that you would guide our hearts and minds to pose questions that will bring more information to us. And we pray that you would continue to guide Trinity as we move through this process. We ask this in your Son's precious name. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Rachel. Change this slide.
Okay. Hold on. Go up.
Gabe. I'm introducing Gabe. He's first, and then it'll be followed with Jeff and then Leonard.
Let me get that phone call, anybody? Can you hear me?
Yes.
How about there? Okay, well, I normally like to just talk off the cuff, but this is so important to all of us that I wrote my thoughts down, so forgive me for reading tonight. I normally just like to make it conversational, but you know, we're really trying to talk about and bring to light this challenge that we're facing, and just to remind everybody what the council has done and where we're at. So I'm going to read from those speech I wrote. So, the life of a church is a journey. And like all journeys, there are many different stages we must pass through to reach our destination. My task today is to look back on some of the recent stages of the journey that Trinity Lutheran Church has experienced that has led us to the crossroads we find ourselves. I moved to Hemet in 1972, and for as long as I can remember, Trinity was one of the most successful and influential churches in the valley. I was not raised a Lutheran and did not attend any church until 1995. And it was this church. But even before that, I can remember so many community leaders attending Trinity. When my daughter became friends with Pastor Tim's daughter, Amanda, she started attending the youth program here. It was such a great experience for her that I started attending church regularly for the first time in my life. At that time, we were filling the pews here on a regular basis. The celebration center here was full full with a contemporary service, and the sanctuary was the same every Sunday for traditional services. Then when Pastor Tim left us and Pastor John joined us, things started to change very slowly. Pastor Tim was very charismatic and popular. Pastor John had a very different style, and we all know how much Lutherans love change. At that same time, worship habits in the whole country started changing too. We could see that our attendance started to diminish, so we started seeking ways to encourage and even recruit new and younger members. During Pastor John's tenure, we tried many techniques to attract families. Does anybody remember our Wednesday evening services with candles in here and a really cool vibe? This slide here presents a graph of the decline in attendance we experienced during that period. At the same time we were taking these steps to bring in new families, our congregation continued to age. Not only did our congregation age, but our beautiful facilities here were aging as well. Again, we worked very hard as a congregation to maintain and improve the property. Big thanks to Red for that. But as with many organizations, many of the same people were volunteering for tasks needed to keep the church keep up the church. We knew that they could not sustain this pace forever. Even our pastor was aging to the point where he decided to retire. Pastor John retired in 2013, and our revolving door for pastors started. So when the ELCA offered us the opportunity to become a redevelopment church, the congregation voted to commit to that process. This new journey was one to be led by the Pacifica Synod, and they provided the call committee at the time a roster of pastors that were committed to the redevelopment process. However, by this time, our attendance had dwindled to the point where our budget would not allow us to bring on a pastor with years of experience and a commitment to the new redevelopment effort that would help to achieve this new goal. The second graph will show how our income and expenses have declined over that time. We finally found an energetic young woman, Pastor Erin, who was excited to help lead us to become a new kind of Lutheran church. One that prioritized reaching out to the community to take Jesus' love to where they were and encourage them to make Trinity their church home. This was a difficult time. Many of our congregation were used to the traditional way of leading a church. Many of Pastor Aaron's efforts seemed to be too aggressive, but the congregation made a great effort to support her while taking on more of the administrative task of keeping our facilities maintained. During her tenure, the Pacifica Synod ended the program required to train and support efforts to become a redevelopment church. And then we all know that Pastor Erin married her boyfriend and left the church to start a new life. This time when she left really opened the door for many great contemporary leaders of our congregation who helped us to look hard at what the future looked like here at Trinity. The whole time our congregation continued to age as well as our facility did. There are so many major repairs that have taken place and still need to be accomplished. Our air conditioning has been repaired numerous times, yet we still do not have the budget to totally replace it. Many of our buildings have a leaky roof that still need to be repaired. Almost every building has plumbing issues that would require a huge investment to correct. We have done a great job at keeping the doors open here, and we owe great gratitude to all the people who have helped achieve that. However, we knew the reality was that in order to survive in the long run, we needed to make a change. So we got together as a congregation and voted the best path was to sell this property and to look to other options to continue the ministry that has had an incredible history here and has done so much in the valley. The following two speakers, Jeff Snyder and Leonard Gleason, will take a closer look at the trends and challenges facing Trinity, and also what challenges and requirements of selling a property of this type are. Thank you. Jeff?
If you'd like to move up closer, it's a good time to do it in between speakers.
Yes.
Yeah, it's easier to see.
Good evening. It's great to see all of you here tonight. Thank you for coming. It's the Church Council's goal throughout these 3 informational meetings over the course of the next 4 weeks to keep all of you up to date on where Trinity Lutheran Church stands concerning our physical buildings and property. One of the items I put up here is that we are not alone. This is something that is happening throughout the country, throughout the world, in fact. If you remember in your annual meeting report, article that Joe Neely brought to our attention was put in there, stating some trends in the Christian church in the United States and worldwide. From 2000 to 2020, there has been a drop of 7% of Americans who identify as Christians. Only 30% who state that they are Christians attend weekly worship services. And also, as we found here, it's the same throughout the country and the world, there are too many buildings to take care of financially, and that 80% of churches today have too much space. They just can't keep all of it up. What Trinity has done to try and remedy some of these during this pandemic, we've gone to online church, Zoom meetings for council and other meetings, Zoom coffee hours. Many people attend this way, and that was to keep the group together, the congregation together. There have been attempts to merge by churches. Churches have dissolved, or they try and stay together at a smaller location. As of 2019, there was a survey, and I believe this was in the article also, that of 1,000 church leaders that were surveyed, those that had merged reported that about 20% lost 40% of their members in those mergers. Solutions we have tried also. Those of you that have been here a few years know that as of 2018, we still had, with the declining enrollment, 2 services at our church. So one of the things we tried to do was just go down to 1 service in 2019. We had an active call committee led by Bill Smith. It was their choice to call a pastor who was working in Hawaii at the time. When we were looking for a full-time pastor, it was very expensive. We offered the gentleman a package. It wasn't enough for him to come back to the mainland, so that was, I believe, in March of 2019. We haven't had, as Gabe pointed out, we have had many interim ministers. Larry Koger, who was here for 3 years, Pastor Milo Johnson, Pastor Linda Vogelsong, Pastor George Crisp more than one time and for over a year. But then he got COVID, he got sick, so we lost him. Then I made a call to now our intern, Rachel Reeder, and she stepped in to help with our Zoom church. And then as Gabe mentioned, Pastor Aaron Armstrong Jones came in as a permanent pastor for about 19 months, and then she got married and moved to Pittsburgh with her husband. We've had many supply pastors. They are very good. Most of them, I'm sure that some of you may disagree with that, but most of them are just outstanding. Now, in early in February, if you recall, in 2020 in February, we came to this facility and we met as a group, there are probably about as many as there are tonight, to continue some community outreach programs. You know, despite declining enrollment of our membership, we were still concerned about our community. So we set up 4 goals. This is when Pastor Linda was here. We try and call a full-time music director. We would adopt a school. We would have community partnerships. And the 4th item was that there would be a change in the internal infrastructure. Unfortunately, because of COVID, those were put on hold and basically stopped, not on hold, but because our last worship service together was March 15th of 2020, and then that was our last in-person service. Then we had to go on to look for other things, and then Zoom Church was one of them. We had to decide as a council and as a congregation what we were going to do next with our property and our buildings. So as president in 2020, I spent a lot of money, or we spent a lot of money to try and, we wanted to head off the vandalism. If we weren't here at the church, we wanted to make sure that it was safe, kept up, and not destroyed by the local vandals. So some of the repairs, and Gabe alluded to some of these. We worked on the AC. We put solar panels on the buildings, not the sanctuary. Fences were put up, not to keep us out, but to keep other people out. Lights were fixed. This is an ongoing item. We had cameras installed. We improved the internet. The carpet and flooring were replaced. And to help the financial burden, we have had outside groups come in, Oración, The Door, Community Pantry, and they have helped with some financial rents every month. Which brings me to the last couple points here. We were finally able to come back to worship in July of 2020 for 2 weeks. One of the weeks, fortunately, we were able to have a congregational meeting to discuss and vote on 3 items, very critical items. One was the endowment board bylaws in our Constitution. The second was to vote on approval of a loan of $200,000 to pay off our solar loan and to fix the roofs on our property. You as a congregation voted to approve those, and so we got rid of our solar loan, and we had gotten rid of our mortgage a long time ago, so those were good things. The third item was to approve the listing of our property. Now this is something a lot of people didn't want to do. Some people thought it should have happened sooner. Some people wanted to wait. But you as a congregation decided that it was time. So we, in your vote, that day on July 12th, 2020, you voted to approve this listing of our property of Trinity Lutheran Church. Now, we had had an appraisal done before in November 2019, but we had not been able to list it until we got a vote from our church members. So that's kind of where we stand right now, well, a couple years after the fact. And so I'll turn this over to Leonard, and he will talk about the sale or possible sale of the church property.
Good evening. I will try to talk into the mic. I'm going to talk to you about the real estate company that we chose to list our property and some of the zoning issues that we have, and also some of the options that we've we feel are best suited for a buyer to in the use of our property. So the Bouchard real estate team offers a complete package. There's an attorney on staff. They have years, probably 30 years of experience in marketing and selling church and nonprofit properties. They also manage properties for those that walk away and want somebody to come in and manage them and rent them out. So they specialize in church real estate, including religious, nonprofit, and tax-exempt organizations. Over the years, they've represented very small, non-denominational churches, all the way up to worldwide larger churches. The Bouchards completed a market analysis that Jeff mentioned earlier on our property in November 2019. Our listing is advertised on a couple of different places. One is loopnet.com and CoStar under specialty properties, and then also a different listing under land. Also, our property is listed in cityfeet.com, as also shown on the Bouchards website. The Bouchards will move our listing from site to site, and this is in order for our listing not to become stale. And when a new listing hits the net, this gives an opportunity for people that may be looking that hadn't seen our church listing before because it was on the kind of stale, and so the newer listings give potential buyers an opportunity to see us. The Bouchards have notified the churches in our valley that we have our church up for sale. This is an effort to let them know that if they're interested in growing their church and moving to a bigger facility, that we might be an option for them. They've also recently, in the last year, started targeting developers, and I'll address that in a little while. Since December of last year, the Bouchards have received 12 inquiries about our property, 4 of which were religious organizations, 4 of which were developers. 1 was a rehab center, and several others were agents that did not have any buyer in mind, just wanted more information about our property. So COVID, it hurt large churches that rely on higher attendance and higher giving, tithing, needed to sustain larger properties like ours. Our current zoning hurts our chances with developers not willing to go through the zoning process, the zoning change process with the city. Last week, we referred a local church to the Bouchards as an interested party, and that's a local church. The property marketing committee, by the way, consists of Charlie Larson, who chairs the committee, Teresa Berg, Jerry Johnson, and myself. So current market conditions, we have 2 churches in our valley that are listed for sale right now. One of them is a 35,000 square feet property in Val Vista, and ours. As Jeff reported, that churches worldwide are having to make tough decisions on whether to merge with another church or close their doors. I recently found a website as I was searching for our listing on the web, and came up with a website that actually had, in California, 143 churches for sale. In the beginning of the process of marketing our property for sale, we mentioned that our church is not like selling a home. Specialty properties like ours, they don't have the demand that houses do. Therefore, this is a process of which we have to trust God, and that God will direct the right buyer to our property in His timing. To give you a little stats about our property, we have 4.67 acres. And we have over 26,000 square feet of building space. Our property is currently zoned as S1. This is for religious institutions. So it limits the use of our property. So uses permitted under the zone S1 are churches, synagogues, temples, and other religious institutions, including educational and recreational areas. This would seem to be the best use of our property. But after the last 18 months that we've had the church for sale, it doesn't appear that there are any churches knocking down our door that have the money in hand to buy our property. The second best use would be a public charter school. Several years ago, a charter school had purchased the Nazarene Church down the street on East Florida. So although that might require a zone change, we feel that was probably a second best possible use for our property. So other options include developers of a senior and or low-cost housing to develop the property with multi-type development on the entire property. And density bonus and government grants could allow for an affordability of residential use. In other words, what that means is basically they would probably pay us a little bit more than just what the land is worth, because they are coming into a piece of property that's already been improved, has all the utilities on it, and can put a lot of multifamily space homes on this. And finally, a developer that would offer to just buy our land would not include the value of our buildings on it. So the price offer for that type of a situation would not be, I don't think, very advantageous for us trying to sell a church with 26,000 square feet of buildings. And I believe Mary has the slide with the flyer. The Bouchers have this on their website available. The office has been notified that if they do receive an inquiry about the church property, to refer that directly to the Bouchers. They vet everyone that calls in. As you can imagine, if you've ever sold a house by owner, you have a lot of looky-loos. They're not qualified, they just want to waste your time, and we weed them out fairly quickly. So we let the Bouchers do that. Thank you.
Okay, now it's time to ask questions, and I'm going to try to type them as you bring them forward. So does anyone have a question? No question, nothing came to you. Okay, so either speak loudly or come on up here so I can hear better, because I'm going to type.
I was curious, what is the church listed for? How much?
$3.3 million.
And now, because it is a church, are we under tax exempt on that?
Yes. Linda, did you also have a question?
Thank you.
Okay.
With the sale of the property, how does this affect the community pantry's business or function? And is there any possibility, has this been taken into consideration of what will happen to them if we were to make a sale?
Sure. And that's a very good question. The question was, in case we do have an offer to sell the property and we accept the offer, what happens to our tenants, specifically the community pantry? Because they are very important to the low-income families in our community. And what I would say is, there's a possibility that if somebody buys the property, they may not have an immediate use for that building in the back. So they may continue leasing it to the pantry. If not, they would have to relocate, and we would have to have that discussion with our real estate people and see what the terms are as far as how quickly we would have to vacate the property and how quickly the escrow would be. So if it was a developer, and the developer had to go to the city to get a zone change, then that could take 2 years. So the pantry would have plenty of time in that time period to find another place.
Okay, second
Sure.
part of the question is, has there ever been any consideration of somehow breaking off or partitioning off that section and giving it to the pantry and just selling the remainder of the property? I know it would be tricky with the way that the roads are, but
Yeah.
incoming, but it probably could be done.
I probably should have addressed that. I forgot that we actually had looked at this. So the question is, had we ever considered just subdividing the property and having the community pantries stay where they're at and either gift the property or have them buy it from us at a reasonable price or a reduced price? And we did look at that. And the problem is, the size of our buildings and sanctuary require so many parking spaces. If we had to subdivide it and give them 40 parking spaces, now we don't have the number of parking spaces required by the city for our sanctuary. So subdividing the property is a tricky situation. Not easily done. Any other questions? Fine.
How long can we go on as we are? And I have another question that I can't remember right now, but
Okay.
how long can we continue this way? And what do we do
Right.
as time goes on?
Okay, so the question is, how long can we expect to stay here as Trinity on our own property and pay the bills and manage everything ourselves? Great question. Part of this will be dealt with in part 2 of our meeting. So in a couple of weeks, we will be meeting and discussing our options. So that's certainly, we do have some options available to talk about. Right now, because we have tenants and we have about $25,000 a year in income from our tenants, that's helping us pay the $1,200 mortgage payment. It's helping us pay our expenses. So if we didn't have those tenants, we would be in a lot rougher spot. So,
Can I ask you that?
yeah.
Good, you're good, go ahead.
So my feeling is we have money in the bank. Right now we're doing okay. Okay? The challenge is that we have to find supply pastors to fill our pulpit. And that might become a challenge. A lot of the supply pastors that we're using are retired pastors, and they're aging. So it'll become a time when possibly they don't have the ability to do that anymore. So Mary has done a great job, by the way, filling our pulpit. But
Yeah, what I want to add to the question was, like he said, the next meeting will be about that. But what we have to remember, there's two things about how long we can last. There's one, financially, pay the bills. The other one is this property. And that's what it is. That the issue we have, and then why we got here, was because we're getting too old to take care of it ourselves. And we didn't have the income to pay the people to take care of it. And the reason why we're doing so well is because we don't have a full-time pastor. And that was something that everybody wanted, a full-time pastor. Well, the challenge was to find one. But at that time, when we were looking, we couldn't pay the $75,000 to $80,000 a year required to bring a full-time pastor here. That's how we ended up with Pastor Aaron. We found somebody who was young and willing to work. And we paid her, I think it was $54,000 a year or something like that. Am I about right? So that's the issue, is to remember how long we could survive. It's the building and us. We could survive, and that's what I was trying to say in the history. we've already survived 100 years. This church wasn't here for 100 years. It was at another, it was on, where was it?
It was right there on the.
Yeah, across the street. So there's one way of surviving is surviving as a facility, but the other way is a church family. And so we decided at that point during the congregational meeting was surviving as a church family was more important than trying to keep this property up, because it was falling on like Linda and Lenny and just so many, Brett. So many people put so much effort in here, and you look around, it still needs work. I mean, Pastor Aaron's done a great job, but it still needs work, And even you look inside the courtyard, it looks great compared to when we had no gates there, but it still needs work. And that's the issue, is what we didn't have. We weren't bringing, the idea was bring in youth, let's bring in some people, and we'll get this place going again. Well, the issues, the challenges we face are the things that Jeff talked about, and now, so this is how we got to this point. But, we're right, the second meeting will be more about what our options are.
Thank you, Bonnie. Did you remember the other question?
Well, I do have another one now. The mortgage, you mentioned mortgage. Now refresh me.
Sure.
Our mortgage was paid off.
Right. We took a loan out to do the roofs. And when we did that loan, it was around $200,000, I believe. Christine?
We took the loan out originally for the solar.
Yes.
The original loan.
Right.
We paid our mortgage off years ago.
Yeah, so
After John was here, we burned it and we almost had
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
We burned it.
And then we had a commitment to the solar, but then we knew almost every building had leaks in their roofs. So we decided to go ahead and use about $125,000 to repair the leaky roofs. So we had to borrow some more money.
And then we used the rest of it to pay off the solar loan, so there's no solar loan anymore, just a loan.
And what is the balance on our present mortgage?
Madam Treasurer, do you know what the balance on our mortgage is?
It's I believe it's 192,000.
192,000.
$192,000.
Roughly,
And we're paying about what? About $1,200, right?
yes.
1,200 a month.
It's about the same amount we were paying to the solar, probably, or a little bit more.
I think it's an increase of like $12 or something, but it's right around the same.
Okay. So having the solar benefits us because we don't have that large of a utility bill. But then we end up paying for it for the solar. So, any other questions?
You
Christine?
mentioned that
Lanny?
possibly a developer might buy this place for just the land.
Right.
You, if I recall, mentioned maybe $1 million.
Yeah, I don't know what that number would be.
Okay, whatever.
Let's say $1 million.
So what would be wrong with doing that?
It's better than a hot poker in the eye, right? Yeah.
Well, I mean, the thing of it is we don't really need 3 million. We don't really maybe need $1 million.
Yeah.
But if we're just going to talk about money, like Gabe mentioned, doesn't make too much sense. I mean, we don't have any use for $3 million.
Right.
We don't really even have any use for $1 million. But if we could get rid of this place.
That's typically a meeting two subject, right?
It's a meeting two
Yeah,
subject.
that's our options, that'd be the next
Yeah.
meeting.
Okay.
To discuss that, what we would do, what we can face, because we had to be offered, we had to get an offer first, and for that, from a developer, because at this point, not even the developers offered us anything. And that cost, it may be more than $1 million, because it's just a matter of rezoning what Linda was talking about. Even I've tried to subdivide a commercial lot near the airport when my parents had it, and it's super costly and it's super time consuming. So you have to get a developer with deep pockets that's willing to do that too. And it would cost us a lot of money to split that off. Even without the parking restrictions of the city, even the cost of subdividing property, a commercial property, is really expensive. hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees.
Charlie Larson. Speak loud.
It was mentioned in the assessment that we got in 2019 that the property itself, without the buildings, is only worth $200,000. I know most people skipped over it when they were reading it because it's 55 pages long, but that would be just for the land. Okay, it's $50,000 to change the
Zoning.
change the zoning. You would have to work with the developer on that. But this way is handled. So, but yeah, without the buildings, it's not worth an awful lot. And I don't think a lot of people pay attention. It's, and to us, let's face it, without the buildings, we wouldn't care. But it's the buildings that we care about, and we're hoping somebody else will care about too.
We can't hear you.
But her point was is that the property alone is worth only $200,000 without these buildings on it. So it's something that we have to consider. But again, that's a property is worth whatever you're offered. It depends who wants it, and what they're going to do with it. So that's always the case. You can put a value on anything, but it's not worth anything until someone makes you an offer, right? So that's, her point was that that maybe we passed that over as a congregation, right? Am I paraphrasing right? That, we didn't realize that. We may overlook the fact that this value of $3.3 million is the buildings, with the buildings, and that we may have to face the fact that we may have to sell this as property.
Right, and the other thing is, you cut off, we have less than 5 acres here. And you cut off any of it, and we have looked into that, because there's been questions about, for instance, the preschool, as they always call it. And so, if you cut that off, then that's even less, and it makes it harder for the church, to have a church.
Yeah, so what she's saying is if we subdivide it, that the value goes down too.
Yes.
Right. Paraphrasing, is that right?
That's right.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of these are second meeting subjects. Am I right, Mary? When it comes to options?
That's partly, but mostly what we're going to talk about is, this is the buildings, we call it the church, but we are the church. And just because we sell these buildings, that doesn't mean Trinity Lutheran Church is dead. We still exist. We are still Trinity. We are the church. Wherever we go, our council goes with us, our money goes with us. We could rent a small building, and we're going to talk about all that. Options, or we can merge, and we can take all that with us too. So, and you said, what can you do with $3 million? We don't need $3 million. Then we could afford a really great minister. Full time. That would maybe bring in that people. But we don't need all these buildings to do that. So we're trying to get rid of an anchor. It's pulling us down like the Titanic. And if the next thing goes, it's going to be the sewer system. Because everything's so old here. There's sewer pipes breaking all over town. I don't know if you've seen them digging up a lot of streets, but yeah, that's so, but we'll talk about all the options next time at the next meeting.
We want to be good stewards. We want to get the most that we can for the property, but we will be realistic. And if there is an offer that comes in, council will discuss it, and we'll probably bring it to the body if it's not unreasonable.
Yeah, I think it's important to remember that these are informational meetings, and that when that time comes, the council is not going to act independently.
Right.
They're going to take those and bring it to, just like the sale of the property was brought to the congregation. That was brought to by the council. I wasn't on the council then, and if I remember right, the vote was like 98% positive. So it's come to the discussion about why we're doing it and how we're doing it. It's kind of a moot point, really. We've already decided to sell. This was more about informing you guys where we're at now. But when that offer does come, whether it's someone that's going to redevelop or to keep the buildings, we're going to bring that to the congregation as a council and seek approval.
And they did tell us it probably, it could take from 5 to 10 years to sell a church. It's not like selling a house.
And I think we made a very good decision when we made it, because the Bouchars tell us stories about churches that wait too long and they run out of options. They just have to lock the doors and walk away. And then the synod has to take it over, and they don't want it. Believe me, they've got challenges of their own that they're dealing with, because a lot of the churches in our synod have part-time pastors or supply pastors like we're dealing with. So there's all kinds of challenges in the world. We just happen to be in it. And we have to pray to God that when the time is right, He gives us an answer. So, Christine.
I just wanted to, not to get off track, but back when Jeff was talking about what was going on with the church, before we put up the gates and the fences, we had employed the Hemet gatekeepers, and that took a lot of time, a lot of money, and
Yeah, the security, the fencing on this property has greatly reduced the number of people that we do have coming onto the property. We still have issues. The cameras, I look at them every night before I go to bed to see who's on the property. It's just something that I do. But one night I found that somebody left the lights on in the sanctuary. So at 9:30, I drove down here and turned the lights off. I don't want to thank you. It's about being the property guy. And I'm very grateful to Red. I'm very grateful to Jack. Whoever's been in charge of property, it's a tough job. We've had doors that have been left unlocked, so we deal with it. We had our janitor leave a light on one time, so I contacted the janitor and let her know that she needs to make sure that the lights are turned off. But all these little things go into running a church. You don't know it. You just show up on Sunday morning and everything's great, but there are things in the background that we're trying to tackle. And the problem is we're getting older, and there's fewer and fewer of us able-bodied folks to jump in and do the heavy lifting. So anyway.
We want you all to know that we appreciate you
Well,
and your
all of the council. We do a lot of work. Okay.
One last point I want to make, because I like talking a lot. And remember that this is informational, and that you can see there's not a lot of people. This is the people I see every Sunday, so I felt very comfortable. What we need to do is make sure that people who are just coming, as we discuss these things, that they understand. And that's why we wanted to get together, was to tell everybody, here's what we're doing, here's what has been done. We're trying to move forward, but just with the realization that something has to be done. And that was decided in 2020, July of 2020. So the idea is for you guys to be able to tell the other people in church, we're not a church that's going away. We're just a church that's dealing with challenges that everybody else is facing.
There's been a lot of work that we've done in the background. The next 2 meetings, we'll reveal a little bit more of that to you, to let you know exactly what's been going on in the background. But there's a number of people that aren't even here tonight that have been involved with a number of different things to help us prepare for that eventual move whenever that happens. So, Mary, any closing comments?
I just want to thank you all for coming, and I really, really appreciate those of you who are taking the time to come and learn and or hone up on it. I know we've sometimes heard it, but it was a while ago, and you forget. And we really need to be conscious of what's going on in our church. We need to have the information so that when we do take a vote, we're making good, informed votes. Not just something that feels good, or because when you finally vote on this, we might not feel good about our vote, but it might be something we have to do, and we will vote with the majority. So when we talk about, everything we talk about in these meetings, these table talks, is going to be informational. We won't be taking a vote. We can't go anywhere right now yet anyway, because we have a church, and we have church to take care of. So we don't have a plan to go anywhere yet. So with that, I just want to thank you again for coming. I hope we see you again in 2 weeks. There's a break in between, and the 2 weeks, in 2 weeks from tonight, we'll do this again. And look around who's here. And if you can think of people who aren't here that should be here, when you see them in church, remind them that they missed this meeting, but they can come to the next one, and there'll be pie again. Thank you for that. Thank you very much. I hope I see you on Sunday.
Thank you, everybody.